so we will call to order the January 21st Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. So first order will be a roll call.
Justin, I am muted.
You are, Dean. We can hear you.
Steve Dorsweiler present.
John Olson present.
Gail Sharp present.
Justin, if you could unmute me, I can call roll.
You are muted, Dean. We can hear you. I'm unmuted. Okay.
So I can, Dustin, I can temporarily unmute myself to ask you to unmute me.
Okay.
Then I can speak. So
great.
Okay. So roll call. Commissioner Dorsweiler.
Present.
Commissioner Rada.
Present.
Commissioner Miles. Board Member Miles.
I do not see her in attendance.
Okay. Board Member Sharp.
Present.
Board Member Olson.
Present.
Okay, with not seeing Board Member Miles present, that gives us 4 members present at the meeting, which is a quorum, which allows us to proceed. And I can report to the chair that the requirements of the Kansas Open Meetings Act have been met, and required notice of today's meeting has been properly provided. So with a quorum and with the jurisdiction to move forward, we can now move on to consideration of the minutes.
All right, so approval of the minutes from the December 17th, 2020 Board of Zoning Appeals.
I move that we approve the minutes from the December meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, so it has been motioned and seconded. All in favor? If you want to do a roll call.
Yeah, was that Board Member Sharp on the, who had the second on the motion?
Rada.
Rada? Okay.
Rada.
So it's been moved by Dorsweiler and seconded by Rada that we approve the minutes. So we'll take a roll call vote for the benefit of the recording secretary. Board Member Dorsweiler.
Aye.
Board Member Rada.
Aye.
Board Member Sharp.
Aye.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
So the minutes of the December 17th, 2020 meeting have been approved.
All right, with that, we're going to go on to new business, and first order of new business is 3.1, which is application V20-6 filed by Emmanuel Church requesting a variance to section 42-50 or 5174 for a sign variance.
Mr. Hers will be presenting this report and moderating. So.
All right, so this report is a continuation from our last meeting when we talked about this particular sign variance request. So I'm not going to go into as much detail going through the staff report as I did last time. If you'll recall, we had a similar request from the church in 2010. At that point in time, the church attempted to rezone the property from R1 single family to C3 shopping center so that they could have a larger sign above their front entrance, their south entrance coming into the building. At that point in time, the Planning Commission advised and requested the church work with planning staff to discuss options for modifying the proposed wall sign to make it fit within the R1 district, which has a 32 square foot maximum. And what we did is we as staff worked with the church after that, and a new design was proposed and permitted for a sign above the entry, the south entry. And that brings us to today. The church has been updating their sign package with new wall signs and potentially new ground sign that would match the existing ground sign in terms of size, but they are looking to have a new wall sign on the west side of their building, and that proposed wall sign would be for a 150 square foot wall sign. It would be illuminated, non-scrolling. It would be channel letters, as you see in the graphic on your screen. And when the sign permit came in, proposing the 150 square foot sign, staff was unable to approve the sign because it exceeded the maximum 32 square foot maximum for wall signs by 118 square feet. And we gave them, the church and the sign company representing the church, the option of applying for a sign variance, which is why we're here today. The application was originally scheduled to come to you on November 19th, but was postponed due to a lack of a quorum. We did meet on December 17th. However, one of the applicant's representatives, Jeremy Hopkins, was unable to communicate with us through our Zoom method of public hearing, and the Planning Commission, or the Board of Zoning Appeals, voted to postpone action on this particular item to today's date so that the item could be continued for additional public input. Looking at the uniqueness of the property, the applicant states that the church is unique in that it provides a lot of community benefits, including community meals, and that putting a sign on the west side of their building would help people know where they are. People looking for the church would be able to find them easier, particularly those that are around the Ohio and Cloud intersection. Staff would note that the need for a variance is supposed to relate to the unique characteristics of the physical property itself and not the unique qualities of how the property is used or how a particular operates. To staff's knowledge, there are no other churches in the Ohio corridor or even in the community that have wall signs that exceed 32 square feet when they are located in an R1 or residential zoning district. And because community outreach and service is a common mission of many churches, and this mission has nothing to do with the unique characteristics of the property, staff does not believe that the applicant has provided sufficient justification as to how the church location and property is unique or disadvantaged compared to other churches located in similar residential neighborhoods along the Ohio Street corridor. We do have a couple of examples of churches that are in the corridor or along the corridor or in close proximity to the corridor. This is a photograph that shows I'll zoom in just a little bit more, that shows the church building and the proposed west wall here where you can see the cross from the Cloud and Ohio intersection. This picture is actually taken from the south corner and not the north corner. This is from where the sidewalk would be if there were a sidewalk in front of Dillon's. Dillon's doesn't have a sidewalk along the Cloud Street frontage, but you can see the sidewalk cut out here where my cursor is on the church. So standing on the sidewalk and looking, at the church, that's what the sign would look like, or what the sign currently looks like. Similarly, I went through and took some similar pictures of other churches along the corridor just as a way of common reference. The First Church of the Nazarene has a 32 square foot sign, which is the same square footage as the Emmanuel Foursquare's church ground sign. And so that's what this looks like. Similarly, from the sidewalk, this is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and their wall sign, which I think is actually under 20 square feet. You have a 32 square foot sign at St. Mark's from the sidewalk here. And then you have First Southern Baptist Church, which has smaller, skinnier, linear sign that kind of wraps around the corner and is viewed from both both the Ohio side or street frontage as well as the Magnolia Street frontage. And then you have St. Elizabeth Catholic Church. They also don't have a sidewalk, so this is taken actually from Oaks Lane here. And this is another example of a church with just a wall sign. And then lastly, you have Trinity United Methodist, and they are located 450 feet from Ohio on Neal, which is about half the distance from Ohio that the Emmanuel Foursquare Church is located. The Emmanuel Foursquare Church is about 900 feet from Ohio. Trinity United Methodist Church is 450, and you can see it. You can barely make it out here in the background. That's the wall sign there. And this is what it looks like from where the sidewalk would be along Neal, just as a point of reference there for that. So continuing on with the staff report, when we look at the effects on the neighbors, the applicant states the wall sign will not impact the neighbors, that the sign that's being proposed would overlook the Dillon's grocery store parking lot, which would easily outshine the proposed Emmanuel church sign LED channel letters, and would not have any scrolling or flashing. The sign would not be visible to residences to the east, which is where most of the residential properties and residential housing takes place, and is over 250 feet from the properties to the north and to the south. And so staff would agree with all of that the sign would have minimal impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. However, staff believes that approving the requested sign variance would essentially be treating the church as if it's a commercial property, which could undermine the purpose of the R1 zoning district and negatively affect the neighbors by eroding the buffering effect that the church has between the commercial properties to the west and the residential properties to the east. Staff would note that it's not uncommon for property owners to want signs that are taller or larger than the sign code allows in an effort to increase community visibility and attract more patrons. And one of the main reasons of having sign regulations is to create a level playing field. One of the biggest concerns is that the sign is 150 square feet, which is over 4 times larger than what is allowed typically in the R1 zoning district, and could undermine the even-handed application of that zoning district and set a precedent for other signs that exceed the 32 square foot maximum. As a way of comparison, we do have a spreadsheet that we created that we looked at last time. We're not going to go into great detail. I did highlight a couple of the churches that are within this corridor from basically Republic down to Belmont, and both of those are 32 square foot or less in size. We have the Church of Jesus Christ, the Latter-day Saints. They have a wall sign of 16 square feet, and then we had a picture of that. And the First Church of the Nazarene has a 32 square foot ground sign, which is the same size as the Emmanuel's ground sign, which is also 32 square feet, their existing ground sign. And there's only one wall sign that matches or exceeds the square footage of the proposed Emmanuel church sign, and that's one of the Dillon's main sign, which is over 150 square feet. And by way of just getting an idea of how large a sign that is, it doesn't seem quite as large on the Dillon site because of the parking lot that you can see in the photograph. but 150 square feet. The Tony's Pizza Event Center sign is 144 square feet. It's a 9x16 sign. Now that's closer to the kind of the mass that 150 square feet would be, because that exceeds the size of the TPEC sign. And looking at the unnecessary hardship, the applicant states that Cloud and Ohio, that intersection is a very busy intersection, and that having a sign that can be easily seen from Ohio would help people find the church, especially in high traffic situations. And that based upon the United States Sign Council visibility chart, the church's proposed wall sign size is appropriate for the distance and traffic conditions. The church is about 900 feet or so from Ohio. So staff believes that approving a sign size variance for a property just because it is located too far away from a major corridor for a typical 32 square foot sign to be seen could set an unfavorable precedent that encourages future sign size variance requests for properties located near but not directly on that arterial street. We use the example of the Trinity United Methodist Church. They are in a residential area. They are zoned R1, and they are 450 feet west of Ohio on Neal. And not that they would necessarily want a sign that's larger, but if a sign variance were approved, staff would be concerned about situations like the Trinity United Methodist Church and what a 150 square foot sign might do in a neighborhood like that that's located in close proximity to Ohio but not actually on Ohio, and is in a residential neighborhood and is not zoned commercial. Staff also believes that Emmanuel has been in operation at this location for almost 30 years, so it's difficult to claim that not allowing the proposed 150 square foot sign would create a necessary hardship on those wanting to find location of the church. When looking at the effect on public health, safety, and welfare, the applicant states that the proposed wall sign will not affect traffic, property values, or use of the neighboring property. Approval of the requested sign variance could undermine enforcement of sign regulations as to maximum sign size, which could be contrary to the public welfare, in staff's opinion. The general public could be adversely affected if this variance were to create a precedent for other properties located in similar distances from major arterial corridors which desire greater visibility like the church is requesting. In looking at the conformity with the general spirit and intent of the maximum size of the signs, the purpose for limiting the size and height of signs in the R1 district is to minimize the visual impact on the neighboring properties and maintain a smaller scale of development. The maximum sign size in the R1 district is limited to 32 square feet in order to allow sufficient sign area to identify the church to pedestrians and vehicles of the adjacent street while minimizing the visual impact on the adjacent properties. In the case of the regulation of signs, there's also the First Amendment and equal protection issues that come into play that don't apply to other zoning regulations. In the case of sign regulations, it is even more important to treat similar situated properties equally and even-handedly, especially religious institutions. The applicant believes that the size of their proposed wall sign stays within the general spirit of the code and conforms to the residential neighborhood because the wall sign faces west towards the large and busy commercial property that was constructed after the church was built. Staff is generally not supportive of granting sign size variances because of the concern about setting a precedent for future requests and concerns about the outbreak of sign wars where each business organization requests to have their sign taller or larger than their neighbors. Staff and previous boards and commissions have always strived to maintain a level playing field for sign sizes and sign heights. Singling one residential property out for result in a precedent for other residential locations unless the board makes adequate findings relating to the uniqueness of the Emmanuel Church compared to other locations and the hardship that result if the R1 sign limitations were applied to Emmanuel Church and the property. So on page 10 of the report, we have a summary of our suggested findings that staff has come up with. We also have a number of alternatives for the board. The board could approve this requested wall sign variance with or without conditions if the required findings of fact can be made. The board could approve a lesser sign size variance than what is requested. The board could postpone consideration if additional information is needed, or the board could deny the applicant's request if the necessary findings of fact cannot be made. To reiterate, in our opinion in our recommendation for this particular case, staff is concerned that the approval of the sign variance could set a precedent for other properties near but not directly on arterial corridors unless clear findings of uniqueness and hardship can be made of the variance application, and we recommend the alternative number 4 listed on the top of page 12. If the board wishes to approve the application under either alternative 1 or alternative 2, staff report of granting relief from the strict application of the R1 sign regulations to the church property. So with that, staff will take any questions that we may have, and I know we went through a few graphics, but not all of them. So if there's any desire to see any of the graphics that are in your packet or that we looked at last time, and you want to look at them again, we can certainly go through those.
So any questions for staff from board? Okay, if no questions for staff, then comments by the applicant. And applicant, please state name and address.
My name is Jeremy Hopkins, and I am with Trimark Signs, and I'd like to speak if I could.
Okay.
You guys ready? And everybody can hear me this time?
I can right now, yes.
Okay. With what he did, I have a different opinion on some of it. Uniqueness to the property. My thoughts were most churches aren't most churches are zoned residential for good reason. It protects the residents of the area from commercial activity. And while this church has residential adjacent to the north, south, and east sides of the structure, the west faces a commercial retail property. And from my experience with zoning regulations, whether or not it's been in Salina, and I have come before this board before, but it's been, I think, 2014, and then also in Wichita, that to me is the definition of unique. Churches in residential areas, I understand why we want to limit everything. In this particular case, this church on one side of the building has a commercial property that is huge between it. So that to me makes it unique. In response to adverse effects on neighbors, as Dustin stated, it doesn't have any adverse effects on the neighbors, so I'll move past that. The hardship side of it that Dustin had addressed. Once again, most churches are found in residential areas surrounded by housing and are easily recognizable by shape and size and a cornerstone to the area. I think we could all agree on that. You see a church in a neighborhood, you know it's a church. At least I do for the most part, okay? It doesn't get lost in the Dillons. Then on effects on public health, safety, and welfare, adverse effects on public safety and welfare, Dustin had said there aren't any and I'll address on the next part. So zero effects for health, safety, and welfare. But back to general spirit and intent. I think from my experience, once again, this is where, take it for what it's worth. I'm presenting this to the BZA as I see it. I understand and respect the zoning regulations and why they exist. I've been in the sign industry for 30 years, so I get why we have them and I respect them. And Lord, I am really glad we do have them, because otherwise, unchecked, it could be an ugly deal. But there are instances in which the design regulations can be altered on a case-by-case basis. And as a citizen of Salina County, I believe this particular request falls under that criteria. If it doesn't hurt the community, the residents of the area, the adjacent properties, or the intent of the law. If the only argument against granting this request or potentially creating an unlevel playing field or new precedent for other churches moving forward on what's allowed in R1 areas, which I agree with Dustin, my rebuttal is as follows. A, if in the future another church was faced with the same unique situation, meaning they were in an R1 zoned area, but all of a sudden a huge commercial property planted themselves between them and a major visible area, I would hope that I would be on board for allowing the request, because I think that's a unique situation. I can't think of another one like it. And then the second part of that would be, I don't believe a new precedent can be set from this situation since it's unique in nature. I don't think that happens very often, at least once again, not to my knowledge. A church zoned in R1 with residential property adjacent on 3 of the 4 sides, but a commercial property on the 4th. And the board exists for, as Dustin was talking about precedent, that he doesn't want to set precedent. The board exists so that we don't have new precedent. If you guys deem that this isn't a unique situation, and Dustin did a good job with those photos that he showed and everything, but the photos that he took of the existing signs, most of them, if not all of them, were from Ohio. Emmanuel isn't on Ohio, so I don't know that that's a fair comparison. But regardless, once again, that's why I think if it doesn't hurt anybody, it's certainly not going to hurt the residents. I don't believe it's setting a new precedent, because if it did, the board would shut it down. So anyways, in closing, thank you for postponing from last month. I apologize for the technical difficulties that I have. And the church and myself, I thank you. And I think Deb has some things that she'd like to say, but I'm done unless somebody has questions for me.
All right, well, thank you, and we're glad that we were able to hear your remarks this time clearly. So any questions for the applicant from board? Now, is Deb part of the applicant also?
Yes.
Okay, any comments, Deb?
Well, again, thank you guys for meeting again. And I have to say that the last meeting was a learning moment for me, because I realized that I actually did not answer that first question correctly. And in hearing what the staff was thinking, what Dustin was thinking, I had to rethink that whole uniqueness question. And as I thought about it, I had some thoughts that I wanted to share with you. And it was that Emmanuel, by Dustin's words, he said that we were approved in I think it was 91, to act as a transition buffer. And it was we were intended to be a buffer between a future commercially zoned property and residential property. I think that makes us very unique. I didn't see in any of those pictures that were compared that there was any church that kind of seemed like us, where there was a large commercial property next to us. And the fact that they were all that makes us unique in that comparison. There wasn't a comparison. We are alone in the sign study. And what I could see, and I don't know what the Ohio Street corridor is, but again, we looked like we were the only ones. So to me, that makes us unique. For the question 2, about the property owners, This sign will not change the overall look of our building at all. We stay the same. It's just going to be on that west side. I mean, obviously, we're less lit. We have less traffic. We have smaller signage than the commercial property at Dillon's. So none of that's going to change. Visually, we will be exactly the same. Visually, we will still remain that buffer property that was intended when we were approved to build here in 1991. As for the question 3, the hardship, I have to admit, how do we know? How do we know there hasn't been a hardship towards us because we couldn't meet a need for someone who had a hardship? We don't know. I want us to be found. I want us to be seen. I want us to not have anything impeding the visual from Ohio. What created this whole variance to begin with was the fact of landscaping or the property of Dillon's. Maybe if they wouldn't have had the gas port or they didn't have their trees along the Cloud Street, maybe we wouldn't be here today. But because there's this blocking, there's this impedance of seeing our building, it kind of creates a hardship. And again, I cite, how do I know there hasn't been a hardship for someone who was in need that truly had a hardship? So that would be my rebuttal for that question. For question D, the effect of the public health and safety, I have to just say the size will not affect the general welfare of the people because honestly, Salina residents do not know or possibly care about the difference between what's commercial property and what's R1. All they want is to be able to find what they're looking for, have it meet their need. Is it accessible? That's what they're looking for. And just on the west side, not on the south side, not anything flashing, not anything fancy or weird. It's just going to be on that west side to help people see us through all the Dillon's lighting and landscaping and whatnot. So I just want us to be easy to find. And then for question E, the general spirit, I feel like we've already established that there's no visual, it's not going to be any impact on the adjacent properties. It's not going to negatively affect any neighbors. It's keeping in, I would hope that our property still keeps in the laws of the city of Salina, being tasteful, pleasant. We're only asking for one sign change, and that's it. And I wanted to point out too the thought of the sign wars. That wording was used at the last meeting. I don't know, Dustin, if you used it in this meeting, but I had a couple pastors that were very supportive in us getting the sign. That there is, I just want to convey that there is no, and we don't want there to be any kind of building war among churches. And so I had two pastors that were very kind, and they said, Deb, I'll write a letter of support that you can read. So I just have two real quick. One was from the pastor at Covenant, and he said, I hope you find favor with the city on this variance. I have no concerns about the size of signage that your church displays. I hope you are able to display signs which effectively identify your church to the community. And then the second email was from Jeff Peebo from Revolution, and he said this: I'm writing to support Emmanuel Church in their effort to obtain permission in placing a larger outdoor sign. I understand that there are usually restrictions on signage in residential areas. There may also be concern about other churches would feel that Emmanuel was receiving special favor. But here at Revolution Church, we wouldn't feel like Emmanuel is receiving any special favors. I fully support their bid for a new and larger sign. I do understand the city's desire to prevent large, bright, flashing lights from being inside neighborhoods, but given Emmanuel's proximity to the new Dillons, I can't imagine it an issue. I live just off the corner of Cloud and Ohio, and Emmanuel's signage and lighting are minuscule compared to Dillon's right next door. As someone who lives fairly close by and a pastor of another church, please accept my positive response in support of Emmanuel's request. So I would hope that our sign would not upset, again, the general spirit of the area. And certainly I have proof that it's not going to upset pastors. And I had a couple other who didn't get me an email in time. But so in closing, I just hope that you consider everything that we've said. Again, I feel like we are unique in the fact that we were okay to build here because the city was wanting to use us as a buffer between commercial property and residential. And again, I haven't seen where that was indicated anywhere on the information given to us. And so thank you, everybody. I appreciate it very much.
All right, thank you for your comments. Any questions for the applicants from board? Okay, if there are no questions for the applicant, then we would take comments by interested citizens. Any citizens, Dustin, after that you bring them on, please make sure you state your name and address.
I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand, their virtual hand or their actual hand.
Okay.
But we can give it a moment here to see if there's anybody interested in speaking.
Yeah, it's good.
Dustin, I
Yes.
just had, for the benefit of board members, just so you understand the chain of events or timing, the property at the northwest corner of Clouden, Ohio was platted and it was zoned shopping center in 1980. And so the property was already zoned C3 for a shopping center when Emmanuel Foursquare bought Lot 2 and built their church there. That lot was zoned residential. And then the property directly to the east on Austin Circle, that was developed in 1993. So when the Emmanuel Church was built in 1990, there was essentially nothing east of Cloud. However, the development of C3 Shopping Center at the corner was not anything that was new or changed. It was in place dating back from 1980.
Thank you. Well, since it doesn't appear like we have any citizens that have spoke up, we're closing the public comment section of this, taking it now to discussion between the board. You know, and I appreciate Jeremy and Deborah, everything that you have said, going back through and looking at this. I would look at it that I don't think that you meet the uniqueness and unnecessary hardship requirements within this. The lot is R1, knew it was R1 when we went into it. Yes, there is a large commercial property to the east of it, but the sign variance within an R1, I think it does set an unnecessary precedent, and I would not be in favor of it. But any other comments from board?
I just wanted to say that I think that the staff did an excellent job of outlining this, as well as with coming up with their findings.
Okay. Any other comments from board? Okay. Do we have a motion, one way or the other?
I'll make a motion that the board deny the applicant's request.
Okay. I will second it. So we have a motion and it has been seconded. We need a roll call.
So we have a motion, Dustin, that which option is that in the staff report?
It would
That's
be
option 4.
alternative 4 to deny.
Yeah.
So we have a motion on the floor to deny the sign variance application V20-6. This would be a roll call to see who's in favor of that motion. Board Member Rada,
Agree.
Board Member Sharp,
Aye.
Board Member Olson,
Aye.
Board Member Dorsweiler.
Aye.
So there's been a motion made and passed to deny application V20-6.
I'd like to thank everybody on that application. We now move to 3.2, which is application V20-9, filed by Bill Winson, requesting a front yard setback variance of 21 feet. Is the applicant
Dustin, can you tell whether the applicant is present?
It does not appear that he is. I'm not sure if he has a representative here on his behalf or not. If so, they should speak up just so that we can identify them.
So Allison, is Allison unmuted?
She is not.
She's
I
not.
am not. Can you hear me?
No, she is now.
Allison,
Yes.
I'm going to have you contact Mr. Swenson and explain where we're at.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I'm going to ask the chair and members of the board if they'd like to skip over item 3.2 and go to item 3.3 while we contact Mr. Swenson, because we did have some concerns about Mr. Swenson's ability to participate in a Zoom meeting. So we're going to have Allison reach out to him, and with the chair's permission, we would move on to item 3.3.
Yep, I would agree. We move on to 3.3, which is application V20-10. On behalf of Chick-fil-A, looking for setback variance of 62 feet.
Okay. So this application is a front yard setback request, and it deals with an 80-foot building line that is in existence in front of the Central Mall. Early and mid 1980s. And there are outlots along 9th Street, 7 retail outlets, 6 of those are developed. And in 2016, there was an application requesting approval of a final development plan for tract 11. And Dustin has the aerial photo up on the screen. And that is a site plan for a new Chick-fil-A restaurant with a drive-up window and ordering stations. That lot is directly north of Chili's. And the plan presented to the Planning Commission was for a 4,971 square foot restaurant building. There's seating for 136 people indoors and outdoor seating for an additional 36 people. The restaurant's not currently open for indoor dining. The building is oriented in a west to east fashion with the main building entrance facing north towards the parking lot. There's a secondary building entrance facing west towards 9th Street. There's a drive-through window on the south side of the building, and the vehicle stacking area is on the west and south side of the building. So for our discussions, for zoning ordinance purposes, the west side is considered the primary front yard for setback purposes. And the building is set back 80 feet from South 9th Street, and this is in alignment with the other buildings on those outlots if you've driven in the area. And so the Planning Commission approved a plan in 2016. Building permit was issued in the summer of that year, and in February 2017, the building was occupied and has been operating. Out that in 2017, October, the Planning Commission presented Chick-fil-A with a landscape weather-protected canopies, 24 by 50 in dimension, over the pickup window on the south side. As proposed, the canopies would only be 8 line. And so a front yard setback variance must be approved to allow a building permit to be issued for a stage structure in this location. So Kat Alvarez, on behalf of Essentia Architecture, has filed this request on behalf of Chick-fil-A restaurants, and it was scheduled for a hearing today. And the request is to allow construction of a metal canopy shade structure over the existing drive-up window ordering stations in front of the building. So, Dustin, I think we have a few photographs in the packet that showed the front ordering stations. Well, these would be photographs that we actually took as staff.
I'm not sure I have those available, Dean. I'll check here in a moment.
They're in the packet, but you're saying they're not in the presentation? Show what the appearance of these ordering stations look like. So all of the surrounding property, north, south, east, and west, is commercial property and zone commercial. And as we discussed, the need for a setback variance is supposed to be related to unique characteristics that relate specifically to the property and were not created by the actions of the property owner themselves. The applicant points out that the 80-foot building line at Central Mall is unique and more restrictive than setback requirements on other commercial properties. We would agree that 80 foot is more restrictive than the 20 really applicable to commercial properties, and it's unique to Central Mall. The other thing that's unique about the Chick-fil-A is there's no frontage road in front of it like there is in front of Starbucks. And so a third thing that is unique is the right-of-way portion for 9th Street is much wider. So, for instance, on Ohio Street, the typical right-of-way width 3 feet of green space. In this particular location, there's 63 feet of green space from South 9th Street curb line to the property line. It's not unique to the property, but Chick-fil-A is unique as a restaurant, at least how it's operating now, is it has employees outside at the ordering stations assisting with transmitting orders inside to the restaurant. The proposed canopy would provide weather protection for those employees. The applicant's representative doesn't believe this will adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners. It will allow for the drive-through lane to process orders quicker, provide a safe environment for coworkers while protecting them from the weather. Staff would agree that there should be a minimal visual impact on neighboring properties. Chick-fil-A site has 1.5 acres. The canopy is proportionately small. It would also be open on all 4 sides. So it should not be much more visually noticeable or intrusive than the ordering stations themselves. As we understand it, the proposed canopy design blends in with the existing improvements. As far as hardship, Chick-fil-A has indicated that at their other locations that they have noticed an improvement in traffic flow and reduction of backups when the canopies. Staff would request that the applicant provide additional information about installation of canopies and how that has helped reduce traffic backups at other locations, and the hardship that would result if the 80-foot building setback were strictly applied at this particular location. We don't believe that the canopy will have any impact on public health, safety, and welfare. And again, we look at conformity with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. The applicant's representative states that canopies are designed to blend in with the surrounding shopping center, that the finished materials will match the existing Chick-fil-A building, and will provide a fresh new look for this property and help traffic congestion. So the purpose in this case of the front yard setback requirement is to maintain visibility and sight distances on circulation drives and at intersections, and to provide a buffer area for green space and landscape adjacent streets. This canopy will be open on obstruction for pedestrians or motorists, and it will be file, so it's not going to have any effect on front yard green space. So from what we could tell from our research is the 80-foot building setback line was put there to ensure that there was enough space for a frontage road along South 9th Street and to maintain a uniform building setback so that one building would not block the visibility of other businesses in front of the mall. Since there's no frontage road in front of Chick-fil-A and the ordering station is open on all four sides, we don't see it. We have determined there's no setback variance required for the south canopy, so we're only talking about the canopy that would be over the front two ordering stations. As far as your alternatives, you could approve a front yard setback variance the required findings of fact cannot be made. So at this point, if the board finds that the applicant has provided sufficient information explaining how construction of the shade structure in the proposed location will improve customer traffic flow and reduce traffic backups, and the board wishes to approve this request, then we the following condition of approval, and that would be the construction of the canopies conform to the site plan and elevation drawings as submitted to and approved by the board. So with that, staff would be open to any questions. I don't know. So the graphics that you have, can you put those back up for the benefit of the board, Dustin?
Questions for staff? So Dean, and I think you've said it several times, so really the only reason for the 80-foot setback was to ensure that the allowance for a frontage road through there, which obviously there's not going to be a frontage road through.
Some of the preliminary plans for the mall continued that frontage road on to the north up to the north entrance, and
Right.
there were various amendments and redesigns to the plan, and the final plan they came up with, they decided to terminate the road there. But all of the buildings that are there today meet that 80 or greater, and to a degree, it's similar to what we discussed with signs, that if to be pushed too close towards 9th Street, that could be perceived as blocking the view or visibility of businesses to the south. And so maintaining that uniform setback line was important to the mall. Aspect is that, of course, we're talking about open canopies, so the canopy is not really going to obstruct visibility or sight lines that much.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? If not, then comments by the applicant. And again, please state name and address.
Hi, members of the board. My name is Frank Ganoon, and I work with Essentia Architecture, and I'm one of the project managers for the Chick-fil-A program here across the United States. With me, I have Kat Alvarez. She's our team member that helps put the applications together and so forth to get approvals done on these projects, whether it's property approval or with zoning boards such as yourselves. I also have Jade Mendoza, who is a project architect that leads the team that does the design work for these canopies. We're here before you on Chick-fil-A's behalf to ask approval for this canopy. Our number one concern or employee health benefits. With the COVID-19 issue going on across the U.S., we don't know how long that's going to last. The restaurant is closed for business in the dining area, but does do about 80 to 85% of their business through the drive-through area now. And if you can imagine, certain locations get a lot of traffic built up around them, and it's very difficult to keep an employee out there when it's raining, snowing, or it's a hot sunny day that's very muggy and so forth. So the benefit of these canopies are they're outfitted with heaters and fans. They provide shade, you know, for those weather elements. And then also what that does in turn is it allows that employee that's out there taking those orders from all those cars coming through there to do a longer shift at that canopy. So we purposely designed those canopies to be in this kind of a situation, in this position through area, because what that allows is the order gets taken through a speed tablet, you know, an iPad, and then it gets pushed through to the kitchen. And the idea is to have, before that car can get up and turn that corner, that those orders are ready. And so what the benefit of the other canopy as well is it's the same situation where Chick-fil-A is going to have 2 to 3 employees outside of that window. And with the smart tablets, the money and everything is already, the meal is already paid for. So in essence, they're pushing cars through as fast as they can, delivering the meal with a couple of more employees out by the pickup window, and it just pushes those cars right away, all the way through there. So that does diminish a lot of the traffic issues that happen in across a lot of these sites. The other nice thing about the canopies is that Chick-fil-A is not cheap. They're spending a lot of money on these. These are very expensive, and we have powder coat paint finishes on them. In some cases, we've even dressed them up a little bit more to add stone veneer look to them, or a brick veneer finish if it's required. Here we felt that this area, we wanted to really not draw too much attention to the canopy, wanted to go real slimline with it, with the slim columns. And again, those will have a powder coat paint finish on them. They are equipped with lights that are LED, and the heaters are operated by a switch. They can be turned on or off, so electricity for the lights and the heat and even the fans isn't wasted when they're not in use. Other than that, I really don't have a lot to comment other than to thank you guys for hearing our case. We do have Mr. Hubbard, who is the owner and operator of Chick-fil-A. He's here, and I don't know if he'd want to say a few more things about this canopy.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Frank, and thank you to everyone else for their time. Frank hit most of the key points, but it really is about them to be out there longer in a more comfortable environment, which saves us from rotating team members in and out, and again, allows us to get more cars through that drive-through. As he stated, with COVID, we're actually seeing, but as we grow, we're again pushing more and more cars through one channel being the drive-through. And we do, if you've been there through our peak times, you see past our dumpster area and into the mall parking lot. And I know we're trying to avoid that. So I think these canopies will just allow us, again, to speed up our process. The canopy on the north or south side will allow us to start actually running food to the cars, which just, again, enhances that process. So it really is a twofold benefit, not only for the team members themselves, but also operationally for allowing us to ensure that we are maximizing the throughput. And I'm estimating probably a 25 to 30% increase in some of the peak hours of number of cars that we could get through with these canopies. So hopefully it'll help us continue to be good neighbors to those around us.
Also, if I may address, I thought I heard a comment about providing a little bit more proof of how these canopies work. Our office is located here near Chandler, Arizona, and there is a shopping center just south of us that is extremely overpacked with cars and parking, and it's just a zoo to get down there in the daytime. So we have a site there with Chick-fil-A with the same similar setup, and it had dual order point canopies and also the meal delivery canopy in there. So as a test, we all jumped in my truck and we went right down there at noon, the worst time you could probably go. And we were the 44th car in line when we started. And we got in and out of that line in 14 minutes and 30 seconds. So that's a pretty significant amount of traffic to move through an order point system like that. So Chick-fil-A really honestly does have this down to science, and they really know what they're doing. We've done this in over 380 sites over the last 3 years, and it's really paid off as it gives the employees the benefit of shelter, better, healthier environment. And, you know, really we're not going to be altering any landscaping or anything. These canopies are going right over the top of the existing canopies that are already there.
Thank you.
Thank
Are
you.
there any questions for the applicant from the board? Okay, if there's no questions for the applicants, I would take it to comments by interested citizens.
If anyone's interested in speaking, there's a virtual hand you can raise, or if you simply wave your hands, I'm going to look through and see if I see anybody waving their hands. I don't see anybody, Mr. Chair, raising their hands, so.
Board for discussions. Any questions or discussion among the board? For looking at the drawings that were provided, they look like they're going to be very efficient. I mean, I'm glad that it's doing a service for the employees also, in the fact that instead of having him stand outside in the rain, in the cold, the heaters, in the wintertime here in Kansas, you're going to have fans in the summertime. We do get hot, not as hot as Arizona, obviously, but it is definitely a benefit, and those do look very nice. I think that, from the pictures that we've seen, I think it'll fit in well.
I did want to compliment the applicants and their team for furnishing us with really good set of drawings that help staff and hopefully the board get a clear depiction of what was being proposed. They were extremely helpful for staff in terms of preparing our report for you today.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. So
I'd like to make a motion that we pass application V20-10 or approve.
I'll second it.
okay, so we have
Motion from Mr. Sharp and a second from Mr. Dorsweiler.
Correct.
So there's a motion on the floor to approve the variance application filed by Essentia Architecture on behalf of Chick-fil-A All those in favor of the motion, Mr. Rada's vote.
Rick, I believe you were muted there. If you want to try that again.
There we
Mr. Rada, are you in favor of the motion?
go. Aye.
Mr. Olson,
Aye.
Mr. Dorsweiler,
Aye.
and Mr. Sharp.
Aye.
So that motion passes by a 4-0 vote. For the benefit of the applicants, we will put a written summary of today's approval and provide that to you. But what today's action does is allows us to issue permits for the 2 canopies as proposed. So today's action is final, and so as soon as Chick-fil-A wishes to submit an application for permits to erect the 2 structures, we would be in a position to issue those.
Mr. Chairman and board members, thank you very much for your help in this matter. We really appreciate this.
All right, so that brings us back to application V20-9. So Dustin, do we have the applicant available?
I don't see that the applicant has logged in and joined us yet. I think we want to check with Allison to see if she has an update, or maybe Dean does.
Am I audible, Dustin?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. The Allison was able to reach Mr. Swenson. He needed to be present or participate in today's meeting. So it's our recommendation to give him one additional opportunity. We will, he has a neighbor's taken an interest in his case, and we're going to reach out to that neighbor to either see if they can help facilitate Mr. Swenson's question or be his representative themselves, since this particular neighbor is in favor of the application. So our recommendation, and I don't have it in front of me, Dustin, do you know what the date is of the February meeting?
Let me look it up here real quick, see if I can find that.
I was thinking it was the
It'll
18th.
be the 18th.
Yeah. So we do have an application already filed for the 18th. And so we generally try to give your bylaws say that an applicant who fails to appear, you give them one additional chance and postpone the item till your next available meeting. So I guess for item 3.2, we would entertain a motion to postpone item 3.2 to the February 18th board meeting. And then we'll do our best to get Mr. Swenson to participate.
I'll make that motion to table this application.
So we have a motion from Mr. Dorsweiler and a second from Mr. Olson to postpone consideration of this item to February 18th meeting. Mr. Rada,
Aye.
Mr. Sharp,
Aye.
Mr. Olson,
Aye.
and Mr. Dorsweiler.
Aye.
So that motion passes 4-0, and that item will continue to your February 18th agenda. And then that would bring us to administrative items, which include consideration of your annual report. So each year, city commissioners ask that its appointed boards and advisory boards talking about its activities, its workload, number of meetings, membership attendance, and participation. And so we had a total of 10 variance applications that were received in 2020 and 1 appeal case. That compares to 9 the previous year. 8 of those were heard in 2020. 2 of those were carried over and considered today. No administrative variances, which are minor variances that can be approved by staff, were held or approved in 2020. Based on our records, you have 12 monthly meetings in a calendar year. Our records show that the board met for 5 regular meetings, and you had 1 for training session. 4 of your meetings were live, and your December meeting was by Zoom. We had 1 scheduled meeting in March that was canceled due to the COVID outbreak, and your November meeting had to be canceled due to a lack of quorum. So the other 5 meetings were not held because we didn't have any agenda items. Last year, you denied 1 variance application. You approved 5 variance applications. And we had 1 variance application that was withdrawn by the property owner. You also had an appeal last year, appealing the zoning administrator's determination that an attached garage that was on the opposite side of the house from an existing attached garage was a second garage. And at that December meeting, the board agreed that the proposal was for construction of a second. Of your 10 variance applications, 6 were residential, 3 were commercial, and 1 by a church. And so what we would ask you especially to do would be to look at the attendance record, and also to look at Exhibit B, which is the membership roster. Just make sure we have your correct mailing address and information on there, and it has your date that your terms expire. That's kind of a summary of our activities. We had 5 meetings, and we acted on or voted on 6 variance cases and 1 appeal. And each of the items today was filed in 2020, but was not acted on until 2021. So if you have any comments or corrections or anything you see as it relates to the board attendance or your contact information, you could bring that to our attention. Otherwise, we would just accept a motion to forward this report onto the City Commission as a summary of your activities in 2020.
I'll make the motion that we forward this report on to the city commissioners.
I'll second that.
So that was Dorsweiler and Sharp.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
We have a motion to forward the report on to city commissioners. Mr. Rada,
Aye.
Mr. Olson,
Aye.
Mr. Sharp,
Aye.
Mr. Dorsweiler.
Aye.
Okay, so we've taken care of review and acting on the annual report. And Dustin, I would defer to you to see if there's anybody still in the meeting that wants to speak at a public forum.
It does not appear that we have anybody, but we can give it a minute or so just to see if anybody is interested in speaking here.
Do we have any unfinished business or other business?
The only other business that I can tell you is looks like we'll be Zooming for the foreseeable future. It also looks like we're not going to be giving you any breaks because we have an application file for February. We have Mr. Swenson's carried over, and we have 2 active applications that we're working on that we would anticipate being on your March agenda and possibly a 3rd. We are foreseeing holding meetings for the next 2 months. So you're not going to get any months off.
It doesn't look like we have anybody from the public interested in speaking.
All right, so we'll close the public forum. So
And
I
I'll
guess
make-
my only comment overall would be is I think that these have gone fairly well. Don't know if anybody else has any comment, anything that we could do to make them a little bit better. We see a lot more people, at least for public comment on these, than we have in the planning and zoning meetings. So
It has been kind of interesting that both the previous Board of Zoning Appeals meeting and Mr. Olson's participated in both, but I've tried to assure planning commissioners that those who do want to participate and join, it's been fairly easy as demonstrated by the Board of Zoning Appeals. It's just that we haven't had people joining planning commission meetings at the level we have the Board of Zoning Appeals. The only thing I would also reiterate is if board members think that a packet might be too detailed or thick, and the fact that we used to bring printed out packets for your use at live meetings, if you do feel like you would like to have a physical packet mailed to you, so you have it available at your place and you don't have to print it out, especially if it's a real thick one, let us know and we can get those mailed out. So I think Mr. Olson got a packet mailed to him, correct?
I did, and I did get it. And what I would tell you is I don't necessarily need it mailed to me. If I could swing by and pick it up, I'd be more than happy to do that than having you guys mail it to me.
All right, we will think about that as well. But any other board member, if it works better for you to be able to have that physical packet to refer to, and you don't want to print out 100 pages at home, let us know, and we can either arrange to have it out for you to swing by and pick up or to mail to you. Because we do want you to have the information in front of you. I guess the only other question would be as to graphics. Are those participating in Zoom? Are you able to see the graphics that Dustin's putting up pretty well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it works great.
Okay, so when he has an aerial photo or something, you can see it just fine. Well, that's probably the only other business or unfinished business that we have.
Okay. We have a motion for adjournment.
I'll make the motion, we adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that.
Second.
Is that Dorsweiler and Sharp again?
Yes.
Yes.
We have a motion from Mr. Dorsweiler, a second, Mr. Sharp to adjourn. Those in favor, Mr. Rada,
Aye.
Mr. Olson,
Aye.
Mr. Sharp,
Aye.
and Mr. Dorsweiler.
Aye.
All right, we are officially adjourned. Have a good evening.
Dean, I do have a question for you before you cut me off completely.
Yeah.
I mean, outside of the meeting. Do I need to come down and sign any of these?
Have for you is we'd have some sets of minutes,
Okay.
and I actually sign the letters for the variances and things that go out, but the minutes of the meeting, the chair signs. So if we had a time where we were gonna get a packet put together for you to come and pick up or something, we could lay out those minutes for you to sign when you were down here.
Okay.
Because I've had Chair Linkowitz come down here and sign a couple things for Planning Commission, but since we're not meeting physically, we got a little bit of a backlog of minutes that need signing, so we've got them here, and so if you're able to swing down, we would hand you a packet and get your signature on these sets of minutes.
Okay, I'll plan on doing that then before our next meeting.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thank you.